In the last of our webinars in our October series, we focused upon prisons and jails and the challenges of managing congregate populations during the COVID-19 emergency. This is an area that is at the top of the list of priorities in the civic debate, rather a new one for the center. I'd like to start by quoting a few comments from our participants as they were listening to this presentation and the Q&A. First one, quote, "As a former corrections officer, I have seen people go to prison for suspended licenses and minor offenses. I really have to agree with you. Those offenses should not be punishable to that extreme." Second quote, "Public health needs to start looking at prison health as the new public health crisis." It's my privilege to reintroduce you to our subject matter expert for this topic, Kevin Kempf. Welcome back, Kevin, and thank you so much for returning to participate in this follow-up to our disaster seminar series in October. Just please introduce yourself to all of our viewers today.
You bet. Thank you, Clark. My name is Kevin Kempf, and I'm the Executive Director of the Correctional Leaders Association. We are the leaders of corrections in the United States.
Great. And that's prisons, essentially, when we talk about the correctional system.
Yes,
as
sir.
opposed to jails.
Yeah, that's right. We have a couple large county systems like Los Angeles County and a couple cities like Philadelphia Corrections and DC Corrections. But yeah, 99% of what we do are the leaders of state and federal prison systems.
Great. Well, again, thank you for
Thanks.
being part of this. As you know, we couldn't get to all the questions that were asked in our disaster shelter series. We want to keep faith with all of our participants and try to get back to the things that are of priority to them. So the first question, actually, I'm going to quote from one of our participants to frame it. The individual said, "DOC facilities are sometimes overlooked when there is planning for displaced populations. In Oregon, for example, they ended up temporarily evacuating several facilities this year due to the threat of fire," suggesting, I think, the question, are DOC facilities potentially of use through repurposing of the space?
If we're going to shut down prisons, it seems a little wasteful for them just to be mothballed and just to be sitting there without use. But the first thing that comes to mind, and if I was in a decision-making role, would be to get with those that know. I would want to get with those that operate, shelters in the community and see specifically what needs would have to be met, and bring them in and walk them through and put a committee, a planning committee together and start looking at. There might be areas of an empty prison that wouldn't be useful. But as you know, every prison has a kitchen, has laundry facilities, has medical facilities. It has there's just a lot of potential use for something like this.
Are there impediments that we might need to think about and address in terms of disclosures that may affect public health and the health of your inmates?
Yeah, it's a delicate issue when we start to talk about HIPAA as it relates to COVID issues, and of course, always considering the greater good in protecting people's privacy. We're not finding a lot of pushback or resistance as it relates to asking questions before entering our facilities about, are you sick, and all of those types of things. I think people generally just get it. They understand the gravity of this thing.
Is it, in your mind, problematic that there's a scope to what you're able to do with released populations, or potentially the flip side of that? Do you have protocols, or your members have protocols that keep some kind of information and management of populations once they're released?
I wouldn't be truthful if I said that that there's a lot of confidence that we can assure the public of anything, frankly, as it relates to COVID. There's still so many questions about when someone is testing positive, when they're infected, when are they asymptomatic, are they carrying it? And there's so much to deal with there.
maybe a little laxity at either end, coming in and going out, if that makes sense.
There became a big time push on the front end to protect. And then as the pandemic started to move, it transitioned to the back end. It's like, well, I mean, what responsibilities do we have to make sure that someone that's getting released into the community tomorrow is not positive for COVID, and that's now going to go out into a transitional home or whatnot and infect a lot of people. I can't think of any that were intentional, where you've got someone that's positive. It's like, well, we're releasing them anyways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think it's the unknowns that and you may not have a legal option, right? I mean, there's strictures on what you can and can't do, what you can and can't ask, even in this emergency environment.
Is challenging even under good times, and absolutely it's magnified in times of a pandemic. And so that communication piece it can't be understated. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about technology, because that was a question that was on a lot of our participants' minds. We're on a Zoom meeting right now.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems to be now the new way of communicating. How has that found its place, or has it found a place in the prison system?
Technology has completely changed the way we have done business. There are systems out there that have the technology in place prior to the pandemic, the use of tablets, the use of video calls and whatnot. With that technology already in place, it was very easy to transition. But we also have a lot of systems across the United States that didn't have the technology that you're speaking of today. If you are struggling, which we are in a lot of cases, in connecting loved ones to people that are incarcerated, if you can't physically do that anymore, you better have something in place where you can still connect them and they can still stay, engaged with their loved ones or whatnot, for all the reasons that you can imagine. Have done a very good job of understanding the need that we have right now and helping us through that. Now, I can almost anticipate what you're going to ask next. So maybe I'll be quiet, because this is an important topic. The cost associated with technology and probably worth talking about.
How do you ensure that the correctional leaders have a place at the table, that whatever is left in the pot is given due priority for your systems and your populations and the safety of your staff and all of the things that go into running a prison?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, we would hope that we've got governors in each state who understand that ignoring corrections is a problem. It's a significant problem. It's a public safety issue. I've said it, many times, and will continue to say it, that correctional problems aren't correctional problems; they're community problems, and we have to get our public to understand that, and elected officials to understand that.
Prisons now will be only peopled by very violent individuals who may have significant co-occurring disorders, mental health in particular, behavioral health disorders. Has that been raised as a concern, that the equilibrium, is naturally going to change in prison populations with these very important reforms and transformation?
That if you take lower risk people, good inmates, if you will, and get them out of your prison system, and are only left with very high risk people, and more of the problematic people, is that going to increase violence? Is it going to increase, or decrease safety? But I'll just tell you, I think what we came to the conclusion was first, just because we have that concern, it shouldn't hinder the decision to release the right people. And second, came from the standpoint of, well, like, if we are going to reduce our prison population, and we can convince our elected officials to not reduce our staff, then that really helps us with the ratio of staff compared to those that are incarcerated, and thus more attention, more resources. And I feel like, in my 20 plus years of corrections, I feel like that in itself would balance out that concern.
I mean, looking ahead, you're going to be building new prisons at some point. Should they be designed with public health conditions in mind? Probably weren't when many of them were built in the first place, at least not to the level of having to manage a pandemic in that population. But are there other things that, from your standpoint, we need to, kind of take those lessons and not lose them when we turn the corner on this pandemic?
A few years ago, I was walking right down a prison corridor of the Halden prison in Norway, a pretty famous prison there. And it from the outside, it looks like a prison. It's got a big gray walls, and security wise was very difficult to get in. But once you got in there, it looks like a college campus. What was interesting, for the first 10 steps of me walking into that prison, I learned that there's about 250 inmates that are housed there. And my first thought was, my gosh, we could put 1,000 inmates in here. And that has been the United States way of doing business in corrections for centuries. It's like,
are these reforms, these observations, these lessons learned, are they being captured in a systematic way? Are they being shared? I think that was part of what we explored in our webinar series about, not only do we have to write the after action before the action is over, but that we need to be, putting it into a system that's shareable and information is retrievable, and there's dissemination of these lessons and good ideas and things like that. Is that going on to your satisfaction?
Just as an example, would be, who does have the authority in each state to release someone? Is it the governor? Is it the legislature? Is it a parole commission? Is it a correctional director? I'll tell you, when this first started to come up across the United States about the importance of, should we start to de-incarcerate because of the pandemic, there was a lot of questions that came up all across the country of like, well, who has the authority to say so? Who has the authority to do it? And so that was one of the things that a big lesson learned for us is to figure out in every single system, where does that authority lie? What needs to happen in order to do something like that, and to moralize that, to have that. So if it's something we have to deal with in the future, like we'll know instantly in the state of Wisconsin that this particular entity actually has the authority to make a call like that.
As you look at COVID 2021, what do you think our end game is? What would you like it to be? 2021
just brings about optimism, for us. I think it's an opportunity that looks like change. It looks like an opportunity for us to just, get 2020 in our rearview mirror, and there's a lot of good things. There's a lot of good things that's going to come out of this tragedy. And as I mentioned earlier, the fact that corrections is being talked about right now, probably more than ever before. If we don't take this opportunity to educate and to improve corrections in the United States, shame on us.
Kevin, thank you, my friend, for participating in this and for the work you do every day. You're greatly to be commended and praised, as are your colleagues and all the leaders in corrections in this country. And we really appreciate your spending this time with us.
Thank you, my friend. Yep, really great seeing you today. And thank you for all the great work that you do. Really appreciate being partners with you.